thanks everyone for spending your evening with us. I'm just so excited about the conversation today. So thank you all for letting me be a part of this. And thank you, Sydney, for all of your amazing work to help organize this. So for those of you who don't know, who don't know me, I'd love to introduce myself. My name is Regina, and I'm the Executive Director of Food Recovery Network. And I've had the honor of being with Food Recovery Network for a little over 5 years now. And I've seen just tremendous growth and increased capacity to do more for the movement. And this webinar series and today's topic in particular is a testament to that. This topic that we'll engage with today is something that over the years, so many of our students, our student leaders and our alums have been interested in learning more. And so, we're able to meet, your requests, and we're able to put together this webinar series. And again, thanks to Sydney for, being at the helm to do that. We get better when we have conversations together and when we share the knowledge that we all have and our expertise. And so that's exactly what this incredible panel is going to do for us today. So I look forward to hearing all of your questions. And hopefully you can share this conversation far and wide to really get at some of the issues that that are ever present in our society. They're ever present in our society, and through conversation and action, open minds and open hearts, that's how we begin to really see that thriving society that we want to be a part of. And so I'm so thankful for our speakers tonight, and very thankful Erin is able to join us too with the Food Recovery Network crew, national office. So I want to just kick off by quickly introducing our panelists who are part of the Building Equity in Our Food System conversation today. And again, just thank you so much for being part of this. And you'll learn a lot more about the folks, when they speak, and then when we have our question and answer. So just really quickly, Kabibi, Detroit, yay. Blount Dorn is the Education and Engagement Program Manager for the Detroit Food Policy Council. It's such an amazing thing. And Kabibi has a bachelor's in urban and regional planning from Michigan State University and a master's of urban planning from Wayne State University. And she's a lifelong Detroit resident and has been a community development advocate and community gardener since she was a teenager. So that's awesome. She has worked with several community organizations in the city of Detroit before coming to the Detroit Food Policy Council. Kabibi lives in the Cass Corridor with her wife and 2 children. So Kabibi, thank you so much for your time tonight. And we're excited to hear a little bit more about you and what you do, and we can go from there. So thanks so much, Kabibi.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for having me. It's wonderful to speak with you this evening. My name is Kibibi Blount-Thorne. I'm the Program Manager in Education and Engagement at the Detroit Food Policy Council. And I'm gonna talk just a little bit about, food policy councils are sort of our role in this system and how we view food system work and equity work within the food system, and then a little bit about some of the tools that we use. So if you're not familiar with food policy councils, they're typically a group of representatives, stakeholders from different sectors of the food system that engage in food system research and make policy recommendations. Some bodies like ours are also charged with writing policies around food. And food policy councils work across sectors, engage with government policy and programs, engage with grassroots and nonprofit projects, local businesses, and food workers. So those are just a couple of the types of groups that are often involved in food policy councils. Over the past 30 to 40 years, we've seen an incredible growth in food policy councils around the country. There have been over 200 food policy councils have been started in North America at the state, local, and regional level. in the last 30 to 40 years. And Detroit Food Policy Council is actually part of a network of over 20 food policy councils that work at, at city and county levels across the state of Michigan. Um, so the Detroit Food Policy Council is an implementation, monitoring, and advisory board that has 24 members representing specific sectors of the food system. We have community at-large members, and we have a couple of local government representatives on the board as well. And our mission is to influence policy, which ensures the development and maintenance of a sustainable and equitable food system, resulting in a food secure city of Detroit in which all of our residents are hunger free, healthy, and benefit from a robust food system. So we envision our vision for the city of Detroit is that we have a healthy, vibrant, hunger free populace that has easy access to fresh produce and other healthy food choices, a city in which urban agriculture, composting, and other sustainability practices contribute to our economic vitality, and a city in which all residents, workers, guests, and visitors are treated with respect, justice, and dignity by those from whom they obtain food. So I want to just go through and call out a couple of places where we see equity being built into this vision, our mission and our vision for the city. So first of all, a healthy and hunger-free city. That means that to us, this means that everyone has access to the resources they need to be healthy and hunger-free. So this includes high quality and affordable food being available in every neighborhood. And in addition to the actual proximity of the food, this also means that um, access to proper nutrition information, transportation, cooking skills, water, all the things, all the elements that we think about being necessary to actually feed ourselves in our modern society is also equitably available to every community member. So we see sustainability as also being an element of equity for a couple of reasons. First, we recognize the connection between the health of the integrity of our living environment and the health of the food that we eat, right? Without healthy land, air, and water, we have no food, and vice versa. So we also know that the impact of environmental harm has disproportionate impacts on communities of color. And I guess I should step back a little bit and let folks know the city of Detroit, if you're not familiar with our city, is a city of um, the last estimate about 850,000, 750,000 people, and over 80% of our community is African American, and another 10% other minorities that are not white, and about 40% of our communities live at or below the poverty line and experience food insecurity. So we know that the work that we do in our community touches so many, we look to touch the majority of our community members. And we also work to make sure that communities like ours and community members that are the most impacted by the things that we work on are those that receive the benefits from our work. So the other part of our mission in terms of economic vitality of the food system, this is really important to us because we know that the food system is also an incredible economic system, um, and and we want everyone to have equitable access to economic opportunities within the food system, and that's opportunities to work, advance, and opportunities for ownership. We also want to make sure that our food system workers have a right to safe, fair, and secure working conditions, and that every person is treated with respect by those who operate businesses and operate food businesses and provide our food. So we know, with something like food, every single person operates with interacts with the food system at some point. Um, Very few people are completely self-sustaining in obtaining their food, and especially in a city like Detroit, and everybody eats. So we want all those interactions with the food system, whether that's in the school cafeteria, in a hospital, in a grocery store, or in a restaurant. We want all those interactions to provide respect and dignity. So some of the things that we focus on at the Food Policy Council and how we make change. Obviously, we focus on policy. Our organization is an organization that works with policies that impact the food system. We work to educate community members about how policies impact the food system and also decision makers. We do research on policy and advocate for policies that make an improvement to our food system. We also have a multi-sector and a systems-based approach. So we make decisions with a body that represents multiple parts of the food system, from sustainable agriculture and retail and wholesale and distribution to institutional food, universities, um, environmental justice. We have stakeholders from all that represent all those different fields participating in the Food Policy Council, so that we know that if we want to really improve, meet our mission and achieve our vision, we're not going to do that by only increasing access to healthy food in our grocery store. We're not going to do that by only changing food purchasing policies within our hospitals. We're not going to do that by only um, improving the access to land for urban growers. We have to do all those things. Um, and we also see the importance of cultural shifts and policy change. So in order to really make a definitive and long-standing impact on our food system, we know that we have to change our policies, but also change the value that we place on food and aspects of the food system. All right, so that's me. I'll hand it back to you, Regina.
Thank you so much, Kavivi. There's so much that you said that really resonated with me and clearly with folks on the conversation with us today. So, in particular, I really loved, when you said, paraphrasing here, but no one person is fully self-sustaining in obtaining their food. That we're all part of a larger system, and I think, when we think about equity, what that really means in terms of we're all honestly trying to get the same things, and deserve the same kinds of respect. So that just really resonated with me. So thank you so much for that. Um, I wanted to now turn things over to our next amazing speaker, Siobhan Terrell. And so I wanted to give a little bit of information about Siobhan. Let's see, do I have this right, Sydney? Am I doing this right? Yeah, okay. I do. Okay, so let me introduce Siobhan to everyone. So Siobhan is a child of the Deep South, a freedom dreamer, and a strategic food systems planner specializing in food and land sovereignty, which is awesome. I'm so glad to learn more about that. As the deputy director with the Black Church Food Security Network, Siobhan manages a local market that steers thousands of dollars in support toward Black farmers and small business owners. Additionally, she travels the country organizing and consulting with anchor institutions such as colleges, universities, churches, and grassroots organizations. Through this work, she advances local self-reliance in the food system. Siobhan, we are so excited to have you with us tonight. There's so many things in your makeup, in your DNA, in this introduction, that I know we're going to learn so much from you. So let me turn things over to you, Siobhan, and thanks again for being here.
Yes, thank you for the invitation and for sharing your platform to talk about food sovereignty and equity in our food system. And I also want to say, Regina, that my middle name is actually Regina and it's spelled the same way. So there's a connection that we have. So I just want to take the next moment to talk about the work that we are doing as the Black Church Food Security Network and advancing food sovereignty and food security in Black communities across America. So you can go to the next slide, Sydney. So food sovereignty is such a loaded term, right? But what is food sovereignty? So I am hoping to demystify this word for you all just a little bit. So food sovereignty is the right of people to healthy and culturally appropriate food produced through ecologically sound and sustainable methods, and their right to define their own food and agriculture systems. It puts the aspirations and needs of those who produce, distribute, and consume food at the heart of food systems and policies rather than the demands of markets and corporations. So I want this presentation, my little presentation, to be interactive. So I want you all to write a phrase, a sentence, a word from this definition that really resonates with you. And as I go through my presentation, I will share more about what resonates with me from this presentation through our work. So I have this graphic, and this graphic shows people trying to get apples from an apple tree, right? So you see equality on the left-hand side and equity on the right side. So equality is basically, as this graphic reveals, that everybody get the same platform. Everybody is standing on the same box to reach those apples. So equity takes it a step further, right? So based on their height, they get extra boxes to help them reach those apples. But what food sovereignty seeks to do is take it another step further, right? And ask key questions around, do this community even want apples? Do this community love apples? Is it culturally appropriate? And it would ask the question around, who put the boxes here? And how can we build our own boxes for when these boxes break? Because, you know, sometimes wood become distressed. So when that happens, how can we put ourselves in a position to build our own boxes and our own food systems? So you can go to the next one. And then food apartheid. So the Black Church Food Security Network is advancing food sovereignty, and we're fighting food apartheid. Like, how do we get to the point of being food insecure in the first place? Like, especially in many Black communities in America. We got here through food apartheid, and food apartheid is the systemic destruction of Black self-determination to control our food, rather by exclusion from agriculture industries, lack of access to arable lands, healthy food, predatory marketing, capitalism, or other blatant or subtle racist and discriminatory food system. This inequity is marketed by segregation, extreme or concentrated health, and low rates of land ownership. So what Kabibi is doing in Detroit with the Detroit Food Policy Council is really changing a policy that create food insecure neighborhoods, like especially around land access and control. And that is an indicator of like food apartheid, where many communities don't have access to the land to even grow their own food, to have a hand, and to change their food systems. So by advancing food sovereignty, we are putting communities back into that key position to make those key determinations around building a just and equitable food system. So how are we doing this? So you can actually skip through this slide because I know I'm probably on time. So in 2015, Baltimore experienced the uprising. And as a result of that uprising, many of the neighborhoods in Baltimore were food insecure neighborhoods, and they were dependent on public transportation to take them to different food retail outlets to receive, to purchase food. But in the midst of the uprising, the transportation services shut down completely. So a lot of communities were without those public transportation services. So many other community residents reached out to the founder of the Black Church Food Security Network, Dr. Brown, who has been known in Baltimore City for growing food at his church, to bring some of that food to communities that were experiencing food insecurity as a result of food being used as a political weapon, as Elizabeth is saying in the chat box. So as a result of that, the Black Church Food Security Network was founded. And Sydney, you can go to the next one. And then our mission is to create sustainable, community-based food systems that are supported by the assets and resources that are found in Black communities. And specifically, we are centering that around the Black church. Because regardless of what community you're in, if you're in a suburban area, rural area, urban area, there will always be a Black church or a church there to provide resources to the community. And when I mean assets that are found within the church, you can think about church kitchens, commercial kitchens, vans, land that could easily be used to advance and to create a just food system. You go to the next one. So we do this through our 3 major programs. We have Operation Higher Ground, the Soil to Sanctuary Market, and the Black Church Supported Agriculture. And then you can just flip through these. And in Operation Higher Ground, we help churches start community gardens. So we help them reimagine their underutilized parcels of land to start community gardens. So you will see a before and after picture on this screen. And this, the community garden that's listed here actually grows 1,200 pounds of vegetables on a yearly basis. And then if you go to the next one, the garden is actually called Maxwells Garden, and they sell their items at their farmers market at the church, Pleasant Hope Baptist Church. And in the Soil to Sanctuary Market, we actually create niche markets, specialized markets within churches, and we bring in food makers, entrepreneurs, farmers to come in and sell their items directly to the community. And then this slide right here shows how we pivoted during COVID. Because we realized that we work with a large high-risk population. So we are unable to have our traditional markets. So during this pandemic, we created our Black Church Supported Agriculture Program, which is very similar to the CSA program, where we buy wholesale items, bulk items from farmers. We transport them from Virginia, North Carolina, and different parts of Maryland to the Baltimore and DC area. And we sell them to churches so they can include those items into their food pantry, their food distribution programs. And then so this slide just goes to show you that the work of the Black Church Food Security Network is not new. Churches did not just start in 2015 thinking about food ministries and advancing food security in their communities. This photo shows Fannie Lou Hamer, who quote that I slid through. Fannie Lou Hamer created Freedom Farm Co-op, which actually had a beautiful pig bank where the people in the community would be able to get piglets from the pig bank. And once the piglets reproduce, donate them back to the bank to share with other community members. And then I think the slide after this is ways to stay connected. So if y'all have any questions, if you want to learn more about the work, you can definitely follow us, add us on social media. And then on our YouTube page, we actually started a series on how to teach people how to start seeds, grow seeds, regrow commonly purchased items from the grocery store at home. So you can check out our YouTube for that.
Siobhan, thank you so much. Oh my gosh, I knew I was going to learn a lot. I think, you know, the idea of food apartheid, food sovereignty, these are terms that, you know, a lot of people, it's new to them because we've heard of other terms, you know, that maybe are not quite getting at the root of the empowerment of the communities that your group is trying to foster. You know, we think about food deserts, food swamps, you know, and so just having that background is really important to empower all of us to speak to, you know, truth to power. So thank you so much for that. And I know the audience is going to have like a ton of questions for you. And thank you too for that action step of letting us know about your website where people can stay involved. It's huge. Okay, so our next speaker, our next guest, I wanted to introduce Carly Moore. So Carly grew up on a family farm in southeastern North Carolina and currently serves as an associate program officer at the Native American Agriculture Fund in Fayetteville, Arizona. She has experience with family farm operations, youth-led food sovereignty initiatives, corporate agribusiness, international agriculture projects, and land grant institutions. Wow, that is so impressive. There's so much there. Carly has an undergraduate degree in chemistry and agricultural business management from North Carolina State, and a master's degree in agricultural economics and international rural development from the University of Arkansas. Wow. Carly recently completed a graduate certificate in food policy and sustainability leadership from Arizona State University. Carly, thank you so much for spending some of your time with us tonight. Again, I know we're going to learn so much, and thank you for being part of our conversation.
Thank you, Regina. I appreciate the introduction, and I think it says that I like school. So, but I'm glad to be out of school now and working at the Native American Agriculture Fund. I'll tell you a little bit about NAF and the work that we do there, and then share from our perspective, Native agriculture's perspective about food sovereignty and some of the issues we're talking about. So, Native American Agriculture Fund is a new organization. It started in 2018. It comes out of the Keep Siegel v. Vilsack class action lawsuit. So a lot of native farmers and ranchers across the country in the 80s and 90s were having trouble getting loans and having loan servicing from USDA. This was not an isolated event. You see other groups of farmers, Black farmers, Hispanic farmers, women farmers, who are having the same issues. Each of those kind of coalesced into their own lawsuit. And so Native American farmers came in the Keep Siegel v. Vilsack litigation and alleged discrimination on the basis of race from USDA in loan servicing. The case was really prolonged and it took a lot of effort to get to a settlement. And the settlement came in the early 2010s. And out of that settlement, there was a set of money that went into Native American Agriculture Fund. So we are a private charitable trust, and our mission is to make strategic grants to 501c3 nonprofits, educational organizations, community development, financial institutions, and tribes across the nation to advance the interests of Native farmers and ranchers. At the heart of what we do is access to credit. We exist because brave farmers and ranchers of tribal backgrounds stood up and said, "This is wrong." We are qualified, we are competent, we are deserving of investment, and our government is letting us down. And so, out of that came this lawsuit, and from that, we now have a chance to change the landscape of Native agriculture. And we're really focused on access to credit. The folks who brought the suit were commercial agriculturalists. That doesn't mean they were all big farmers or big ranchers, but they were all in it trying to make a living. And so we're really interested in how do we support the current generation of Native farmers and ranchers, and how do we produce a strong new generation of Native farmers and ranchers. And I really am delighted to hear from the previous panelists. Um, we share a lot of the same mission, especially when you're talking about food sovereignty. So for us, we talk about food sovereignty, and I love the definition that was given. I'll just add one more layer. Is for tribal people, we have tribal sovereignty. And so I'm sure that you know a little bit about the history, even though it's not taught well in schools. And so Native people today, the government still retains sovereignty and have sovereignty over their land. But oftentimes, the federal government and other entities do not respect that as it should. And so, while we're fighting for food sovereignty, we also fight for the sovereignty to set our own rules, our own policies to feed our own people. And so, that's really at the core of what we do. I also want to mention, whenever I'm invited to speak on behalf of my organization, I like to point out that I can give a Native perspective, but I can't give all the Native perspectives because there are over 600 federally and state recognized tribes in the US. So, really diverse and sometimes divergent cultural norms. But a few of the areas that we find consensus on in Native agriculture and food policy in general is that there are barriers to equity and visibility. So to to have an equitable system, first you have to be able to see the people who are marginalized. And a lot of times, native farmers and ranchers and food producers, and extend that to fishers and harvesters and people with community gardens, are left out of the conversation. A lot of times, on national level, from organizations, they'll have statistics about different groups, and Native Americans are left out or are considered among the group of other. And so one of the things that we can do to fight back against that is just visibility and saying, do you know what native land you are on? And do you know the indigenous people of your area? And do you know their traditional foodways? How can you get involved, and how can you be connected to these foodways that have been existing for generations and generations? And then also we think about, in a commercial sense, what are the big barriers holding us back from contributing more fully to the agricultural and food landscape? And one of those is infrastructure development. So Native American Agriculture Fund CEO Janie Hip, along with all of my other colleagues at NAF, recently released a report on reimagining Native food economies. And this is a vision for investment in Native agriculture that orients itself around infrastructure investments. We right now have a strong cohort of Native producers who are growing cattle or are planting and harvesting corn, are catching salmon. But what's the next step in the value chain? How do we go from producing and harvesting our food to processing it, to marketing it, to getting it on the table? And so we're really interested in pushing into more of the value chain and having Native people control our food from harvest to processing to the plate. And then another area that we're really interested in is policy. So all of you are probably familiar with the Farm Bill. It's happens about every 5 years and really impacts a lot of agriculture and food in the US. There are a lot of things that could be better about it. And so it's important for groups such as Native farmers and ranchers, Black farmers, Latino farmers, others to come together and to advocate for changes there. Because a lot of what is decided there, the appropriations, the policies set forth, do impact us in our communities. And frankly, we weren't at a table when it was first written. So it's really important for us to come to the table and advocate for our interests at that point. And then one more thing I'll touch on, I heard before about land and access to land. And that's one of the things that we as a group of tribal producers, we have land and we have sovereignty over that land. Of course, it's much less than what it was before, but that's one of the areas that we uh, want to highlight as a strength, because it's really easy to come at it from a deficit point of view, but strengths-based advocacy says we Native people have land, we have our cultures with traditions, we have our foodways that have been here for generations before any settlers came. We can go back to this, not saying we're going to go back to the same methods, but we're going to go back to the cultural significance of producing food and taking care of our communities. And now our communities include all of us who are here on this land, right? And so it's really important for us to support Native farmers and ranchers in producing food the best way that they can, with an emphasis on regenerative agriculture and a changing climate, so that we're all food secure and food sovereign. So thank you.
Carly, thank you so much. I was just furiously taking some notes based on what I was hearing from you, and you know, in particular, of the many things, you know, just the concept of being able to see people really resonated with me. I was listening to Democracy Now! This morning, and you know, one of the things they're talking about with the many recounts that are happening is, I don't remember which state it was in. So forgive me for that, but part of the recount, you know, they were looking at it based on race, quote unquote. And, you know, they had white, Black, Asian, Latino, and other. And within that other are people like me who identify as multiracial, and then the various, you know, Native peoples that, you know, were in that state. And, you know, everyone was just, you know, breathing some humor into that around, you know, like, okay, other, or some, you know, some other, and that's just, you know, the inability to see people. So, you know, I just really appreciate this invitation, you know, to see people, to see one another, and what we can achieve when we do that. So thanks for all of that amazing knowledge you just put forward for us. So I wanted to now introduce Alex Epstein, our next speaker, and I'm really excited to read Alex's intro. So Alex is an earthling, an organizer, artist, farmer, educator, and student of the universe. How about that? On top of that, Alex is a co-founder of the Urban Creators, a North Philadelphia-based collaborative that fuses food, art, and political education as tools to nurture resilience and self-determination. Since 2010, the Urban Creators have transformed 3 acres of vacant land into a network of flourishing urban gardens, public green spaces, and venues for artistic expression, community organizing, and social entrepreneurship. Alex believes in the central importance of relationships and is deeply committed to practicing emergent, adaptive, and collaborative leadership as guiding values towards building collective liberation. So Alex, thank you so much for your time today. Again, like everyone here that's speaking thus far, I cannot wait to learn more about your pursuits and you as a human, as an earthling, and thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. I've never heard anybody read that out loud before, so I'm soaking it in. It reads different audio and as opposed to written. But yeah, no, it's really an honor to be here, even if only in virtual form, and to be a part of a panel that really is bringing so many different perspectives to this question about, what does and what can equitable food systems look like. Honestly, I'm coming from a very different perspective than the rest of the panelists. I'm a white dude who is working. I've been working in North Philadelphia for 11 years now, which is a Black community. And I'm really kind of always in a process of trying to figure out what my role is in that work and in that community, and also what my role is not. And that's, I think, to one extent or another, that's a part of all of our work in community. But for myself as an outsider to this neighborhood, it's just a part of the journey. It's a part of my work. And I feel, 11 years later, I feel really incredibly fortunate to have found community and to have found family in North Philly, and have been a part of this journey of co-creating our dreams together. I was 19 when we originally started co-founding the Urban Creators. There were 15 of us who were co-founders. The youngest co-founders were 14. The oldest at the time was, I think, 20. So we were kids playing in garbage and dirt and trying to just figure out what it was that we could do together to create just a small version of a world that we believed in and that we believed could be possible. And we've been really committed to working on a local level. I think that when you try to manifest, when people try to manifest their dreams at scale, which is what the nonprofit industry kind of pigeonholes organizations into doing, scale, I think, can really threaten the integrity of grassroots work. And we've definitely chased funding as a way of just being able to survive and do our work, but kind of sacrificed part of our soul and our identity along the way by writing these grants that were about scaling and growing, and all of that language around scaling and growth and impact, quantitatively speaking, that's all reflective of colonization. All of those words, all of those concepts are reflective of the systems and the values that got us here in the first place. And part of our journey over 10 years has been coming back to our values over and over again and learning from our mistakes over and over again, to really just define what it is that we're trying to do in a really, really small local space in this one corner of North Philadelphia, and how we as a collective can live our values, practice our values, grow food together, celebrate with art and music and entertainment, and create spaces for our community to educate one another, to organize, to address those larger issues. We're really just trying to do what we do where we're at, and then invite people to join in on that journey with us, and hopefully be inspired by some of what it is that we have done well, and then also learn from our mistakes as well along the way to apply that to, community work wherever folks are from. So again, like part of my journey is being from New York City. I'm really trying to think now these last couple of years about how I can go back to the community that I'm from and challenge folks. I'm from a white upper middle class community, and I'm trying to think about how to challenge folks from where I'm from to rethink their privilege and rethink their role in as participants in building an equitable food system. And ultimately, I guess to answer that question of like, what does that look like? There's really not much I can add after from what everyone else has shared. But I think that an equitable food system is one where we're able to participate. It's a process to participate in the process of growing food and to be in relationship with community and with the earth. And I think that being a city kid who has had the opportunity to work with one plot of land for, at this point, more than a third of my life and my entire adulthood, is a blessing. And I've discovered a relationship with that land on a really spiritual level. It's something I'm still tapping into. And what's frustrating about agriculture on a large scale, but even sometimes in food justice work, is that what's really left out is the earth, is our mother, and where we ultimately all come from and where we're ultimately all going. And I think that taking some of that consciousness into account, I think some people talk about like, what would Jesus do, or what would Michael Jordan do, as like kind of a guiding principle. I just think about what would nature do when I'm stuck and I don't really know like how to address a problem. I often think about like how would nature address this problem? And usually the answer is something to do with balance and harmony, and more often than not, compost. Sometimes ideas need to die, and we need to let go of stuff. We need to let go of ego and things we thought were meant to be, in order for those ideas to compost and for there to be room and space and nutrients for like new ideas to generate. And if we do it, then new ideas are old ideas and old ideas are new ideas, So I don't mean to get too spacey with it, but I guess my thing did say something about the universe. So that's all I'll say for now, but thank you again for having me on this panel and in the conversation.
Thank you so much, Alex. Oh my gosh, I love it. Compost your ego. Yes. That's how we can do this. Now, I will say we're going to move into the Q&A portion of our time together. And I am so excited to see that we already have some questions bubbling up. And I know that some of us are still, absorbing the things that Kibi, Siobhan, and Alex have just shared with us. So please keep your questions coming. I'm going to ask a question to the panelists, and then I want to bump things back over to Sydney, our amazing moderator for tonight, to continue on with the Q&A, so I too can just absorb. And so, I just am so thankful about all the things that I've learned from the three of you tonight. And the importance of earth. The four of you. Carly is not on my screen. Sorry, Carly, about that. And how important the earth is when we think about food sovereignty and food justice. And I was also struck by bringing people to our table. The table that we are building for our communities. And I know right now things are very heated. There's still a lot of pressure. And, I'm about to send a message to the full network, a short video about, this pressure for many of us didn't go away after the election, because many of us still don't have enough food to eat, or we don't have home safety. And we still have, financial worries, and that stress and that pressure is still there. And, a lot of that pressure is, created by our systems, that are not equitable. And, the past few years have been so fractured and so much pressure. So my question to the four of you are, when things really feel so divided, it feels like, well, I literally cannot talk to certain people, or the people in power are just so off the mark on what it means to, not have enough resources to survive. My question to all of you is, in the spirit of hope, with all the work that you do, um, I wondered if you could just give us a quick anecdote of a time where you have been able to successfully bring somebody to the table. Maybe somebody in a position of power, or somebody who, has those antiquated thoughts on, like, people are poor for a reason, or they don't have enough for a reason, and it's usually their own doing. Of just gently bringing people into the larger work of food sovereignty, equity, um, anything that might come to mind. And then I'll kick things over to Sydney.
I guess I can pop it off. That was a great question, Regina. And I don't know if I have the expertise to answer that, since I have little to no background in mediation. um, but I am thinking about meeting people where they are. And I'm also thinking about, in regards to, like, back to the definition of food sovereignty, how can we put the people who consume the food back at the heart of the food system? Um, One of the things that we did during this time is we had a food preservation series, getting back to what our grandparents used to do. Because when the grocery store shelves went empty, um, a lot of people thought, like, oh, that's the end of our food chain, our food supply chain. So we realized that, back to what Carly was saying, is like, we have the knowledge in our culture, we have the knowledge within our gene pool, but what we have to do is just get back to what our ancestors would do in times of crisis, like food preservation. Turning peaches into jam was something that they used to do. Save seeds from tomatoes was something that they used to do, and different things like that. So I guess that's what my answer is: just getting back to our culture, like getting back to our identity as a people.
Yeah, and the thing that comes to my mind first is a situation where um we were working, and I don't know if this directly addresses what you're kind of saying, but just like the idea of like people getting it or something clicking for people. Um, we worked with, we've been working for several years on improving the city's ability and process for allowing urban growers to purchase land. Our city has a lot of vacant lots. A lot of them are owned by the city, and it's really hard for growers to actually get access to that land a lot of times, even though it's in their own communities. So we were working with a multi-department working group with the city that included, folks who had been working with growers, like the planning department, as well as folks who hadn't really been working with growers in the past. So folks from the law department, the land bank, and the building and engineering department, right, that are ultimately involved in the land sale process. And so, it had been a journey to get them to understand like what we mean by urban agriculture when we talk about people who are growing food in the city. Um, and we invited this team to present on the work that they have been doing on revising some of the policies at our annual food conference here, in our annual food system conference that we organize here in the city. And The session just before their presentation was from Ricardo Salvador. And if I don't know if you're familiar with Ricardo Salvador, who works for the Union for Concerned Scientists, but he does a really great job of laying out the history of the food system, all the places that inequity have happened throughout our food system and are happening today, and how we um, impact the food system to build a more equitable food system. But he really walks you through, what the food system is, how it operates, where um, where inequity is happening. And for most of us, I think that even though all of us participate in the food system every single day, all of us eat multiple times a day, but especially for people living in urban communities, the vast majority of the activities that happening in the food system are mostly invisible to us, right? We just think we want to eat. We walk into a store or a restaurant, look at a list of things they have and order it. Um, and after that presentation, one of the members of that interdepartment group from the city was like, "Oh wow, I I understand what you guys were talking about now. This totally all makes sense." And he was really engaged and really activated um, around that work after he had that experience with us. So I think one thing is really just, you know, laying out, making it more broadly, the information more broadly available and more broadly understood about what the food system is, how it operates, where inequities happen and why. Um, they're not just incidental to the food system, they're actually built into how the American food system operates, is based on a system of inequitable labor. And of and so just having I think the important thing is having those conversations over and over again. Like, I'm always willing to sit down and talk with someone about why the food system works and why I think it's important to know about it and what they can do um, to be activated around it.
I think I'll just add one thing. Native American Agriculture Fund is in a unique position because we're to support all Native farmers and ranchers, and they do not look the same. Some of them are subsistence farmers. Some of them are gathering, excuse me, some fell. Some of them are gathering forest products to feed their family. Some of them are fishing in the rivers or off the coast, and others are engaged in full-scale commercial production. You see some cattle behind me. This is from my family's farm. And so we're in direct sales, and there's so many different ways of producing food. We have folks who are adhering to their traditional cultural methods, and we have folks who are doing we have like a symbiotic controlled environment agriculture project that NAF has sponsored recently. And so oftentimes we're in positions where we have competing interests or competing philosophies of how to do it. And what we find is it's best to just stay focused on who we're supporting. So we're supporting Native food producers. And so if you're a Native food producer, we're on your side. And all of that other stuff, of course, is important to talk about, but at the end of the day, we come back and acknowledge that each person has worth and value because they're producing food. And once we get to a position where everybody is well fed, both calories and nutrients, and we have an abundance, then maybe we can talk about you stepping out. You know what I mean? But for now, we need everybody in doing what they can to make it a better system. And I turned off my camera for a bit because Siobhan was talking about food preservation. And I am here. I just moved back home because of remote work. I'm here in my great uncle's house. And I found this. I know you can't see it too well. This is from 30 years ago. This is food out of the garden that my uncle grew and preserved. And there are 29 other of these because he grew up in the Depression. And when they got food, they didn't waste it. And so just thinking about that made me say, wow, I am in the position to actually be in a home here where there's food. If something happened, I don't know what this is exactly, but if something happened, it's here and I trust that it's safe. And so how do we get everybody else to a position where they're not at the end of their rope when something goes wrong, when we're in a crisis?
Thank you all for your answers to Regina's question. I have several questions of my own, but in the interest of time, I want to turn it over to our attendees. So one question from Thomas O'Donnell, specifically it looks like for Carly, are the USDA and US EPA tribal programs providing specific help with Native American agriculture? Also, he is interested in you speaking about agriculture and poor quality lands, if that affects your work as well.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So certainly USDA has programs that are targeted to various constituent groups. The CEO of Native American Agriculture Fund had the honor of starting the Office of Tribal Relations at USDA. Her name is Janie Hip. And so in that time, it was about building the nation-to-nation relationship between the United States federal government and the various tribes across the nation. I do want to hit on that again, that there's this element of sovereignty and national citizenship that tribes and tribal individuals have, and that relationship with the government and therefore the USDA. There are programs and extension offices and all types of resources that are scattered around Indian country, but they're, like all of the other things, are vastly underfunded. We actually find that there are a lot of strong private partners, so in nonprofit space, who provide a lot of the technical assistance and outreach that our native producers rely on to operate their agricultural farms and ranches. Speaking about quality of lands, so I touched on earlier the need for regenerative agricultural practices. That's really important for us because some folks might have the mindset of, okay, we're going to farm this land, and when the land is no longer fruitful, okay, we'll just go find other fruitful land. And you may know who that sounds like, right? But that's not us. That's not native folks, because this land is our land. And so if it's burning, it's still our land, right? A lot of tribes were displaced by the wildfires, or if it's a hurricane coming and it's flooded, it's still our land, and that's where we are. And I'm sure a lot of other people can share that sentiment. And so it's really important for us to invest in our lands. But one of the issues that we have is the modern food and agricultural system, the way that it's so dependent on marginal profits, is that you can't really invest in these regenerative practices that would be the best for the land, because you're trying to keep your head above water for the next year to just produce more food, right? So really complicated issues, but thank you for that question.
Thanks so much for speaking to that, Carly. I wanted to jump down to the question from Morgan, and this is specifically for Alex, but if anyone else has anything to add, please jump in. In reference to Alex's comments on scale, how is consolidation in agriculture exacerbating existing inequities throughout the food system, and what are some strategies for fighting it?
That's a big question. Well, I don't really know how to answer that, to be completely honest, because I just work on such a small local level and don't have a lot of experience working in policy or at scale. But I do think that, and maybe this is something we can speak to a little bit more on that level, but I think that generally speaking, we as a species on this planet have, in relatively no time, moved from a history of like tens of thousands of years of living and working in small, intimate communities and surviving that way. And only for the last few thousand years, which is nothing on the grand scheme of things, we have changed all of that. And we've begun to operate at scale and have entered this globalized civilization, which brings a lot of wonderful things like air conditioning and heat when it's cold, and Amazon can deliver you things like that. But I think the question is, at what cost? And right now, when I think about coronavirus, I kind of go back and forth between just like being really depressed about the effect that it's having on my life in the world, and then I flip back and I think about, well, what is the earth really trying to tell us here? Like, what is coronavirus communicating to us? And there's a part of me that really feels like coronavirus is a part of Earth's immune system, and that global warming is a part of Earth's immune system. Like when we get a cold or when we get a virus in our bodies, our bodies try to fight off that virus by getting a fever. Our bodies increase our internal body temperature to create a climate that is no longer habitable for the virus to survive, so it can leave our bodies. And global warming feels awfully similar to me. And so it kind of raises again, like, at what cost? And so I think when we think about the benefits that come with, or what we think of as benefits of consolidating an industrial food system, we have to think about the impact that's having on the planet and our longevity as a species, the impact that's having on our brothers and sisters of the plant and animal kingdom. And I don't know, it really makes me wonder where we went wrong along the way. And think about, what can we learn from our ancestors? And not just 2-3 generations before us, but like 10, 11, 12, 20, 50 generations before us. They were onto something. And you look at any other species on the planet, like they're operating in ecosystems together, like in harmony, in some kind of like emergent balance with everything else that lives in that ecosystem. And we've just taken ourselves as a whole, not everyone, but largely taken ourselves as a species out of that balance. And if we don't fix it, we're going to take ourselves out. And that, I don't mean to be too dark and gloomy, but it does feel that way sometimes. And I think that's why I'm emphasizing the local work. And I think the way that we can have larger scale change is when pockets of local, hyper local work connect to each other through partnership and collaboration and relationship, and share information and resources and people power and energy and love with each other. That's when larger scale change can happen effectively without it costing us, what we have.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with everything you said, Alex. And I think what I would add to that is that, the in terms of consolidation in agriculture, that kind of consolidation happens all along the food chain as well. And I think what's really important is being aware of what your own food ecosystem looks like, being and looking at the policies that are driving our food system, especially in agriculture. Carly mentioned the farm bill, which is and has been an incredible tool throughout the last century and a half for actually shaping what our agriculture system looks like in the United States. And it favors larger corporate farms and commodities production over actual other kinds of food production. So I think this is a tool that as the farm bill comes up for reauthorization, focusing on advocating for policies in the farm bill that um, that emphasize small and entering farmers, farmers of color, and um, not just commodity food production. Um, but I think something more accessible, though, that individuals can also do is like, try to um, grow and buy food that you can get close by to you. Like, you know, I always tell people the first step, like, visit a farm stand or a farmer's market, buy food in a place where you know who the farmer is or can talk to the farmer and ask them questions directly. um and it really helps you become an advocate for what farmers do and what farmers need. Um, and there are also many other steps sort of in between those two things. But those are the two things that I would say first come to mind.
Thank you both for that answer. So we have time for one more question, which I want to kind of pull from a few different questions and also bring it back to the current situation of the pandemic that we're living in. And I am wondering what you all see as the future for the food system. Tom O'Donnell asked Siobhan specifically what Black Church Food Security Network would like to see in a perfect future within the food system and where food would come from. So I challenge you all to share your vision for a perfect food system with us.
So a perfect and an ideal food system to me looks like a local food system, micro food systems. Back to the definition of food sovereignty, lifting up all of those values, centering people, food that's culturally appropriate, using regenerative agricultural practices to grow the food, being in partnership and community with your farmers. Also leaning on community institutions and anchors, right? In regards to the piece around the Black Church Food Security Network and what would that look like, is that having the church or different institutions within your community participating in the various phases of the food system. Because usually when we think about food system, we just think about production and consumption, but there's also processing. How can we process our food in a healthy way, right? Without adding all of those GMOs, different things like that. And then also, how can we also talk about food waste and composting, and how can we do that on a local and a regional scale where that compost is then being put back into the community. So an ideal food system to me looks like, in the lens of the Black Church Food Security Network, having churches participate in every phase of it, using their commercial kitchen to help food makers get their start, using their church van to have local Meals on Wheels and food delivery programs, using their underutilized land to grow food, give lease their land to new and beginner farmers who don't have access to land, and using their space for farmers markets in the community.
Well, I'll just add just a little bit. I love what Siobhan said. I'll add that for a lot of Native peoples, while there's a really big focus on local, trade was also really important to us. So if you look back into the history, and you can find just from oral stories now with people who know, but also if you want to look to other evidence from artifacts and such, you'll see that the jewelry from the coastal regions found its way into the Great Plains, and that's because of trade, right? And there's trade routes throughout this whole continent, not just in the current boundaries of the United States. And so we're really going back to that whole idea of NAF representing tribal farmers however they want to show up and how they think is right to produce food and provide food for their communities. That's the important part for us. And so a perfect food system, I hate to use that word because I know I'm going to leave some critical part out, right? I'm not smart enough to figure that out. But a better food system for us would look like tribal producers, other producers having a way to make a living, to feed their families and their communities while respecting the land. And if that is hyper local and only eating what's seasonally appropriate and what was traditional to indigenous diets, then we support that for sure. And we have lots of folks on our team who are really well trained and trained nutritionists who can tell you that. I saw earlier in the chat food as a political weapon, and it sparked an idea for me. So, if you're familiar with a little bit of the reservation system in the US, Native people, a lot of Native people were displaced from their homeland, so displaced from their way of producing food or hunting for food or gathering food, and then made dependent on the United States for food rations. And then those food rations that were provided are completely, our bodies are not adapted to receive those well. And so then you see high rates of negative health impacts in Native peoples directly related to those diets that were forced upon them by the government, going back to food as a weapon, right? And so for us, a better food system would look like people being able to choose what they want, what their bodies are adapted to, what's seasonally appropriate, what they want to trade with other folks who are going to fairly value their labor and their input into that. All really interesting topics, and I think with all the folks here who are working on it, and the panelists and the attendees, everybody contributing there, hopefully we will get to a better place.
Um, those are both really great visions. I think what I would add to that is that everyone is equipped with the resources and information to make their own decisions about their health, um, their economic opportunity within the food system, um, and their own individual impact on their community and the environment. Um, and that everyone is able to understand, to be able to obtain all of their food from their own effort or the effort of someone that they know or can have contact with, so that they're not that all food is locally produced or direct marketed, but that they have that avenue available to them, and that it's accessible, affordable, um, and high quality, and that everyone is understands the value of food in our society, the value of the food system, um, the value of the labor that that provides our food throughout the food system.
I honestly don't have much to add to all of that. I really agree with those visions. Emphasize the local and connection through trade and relationship building. And I would probably just add that as much as everybody has an opportunity to access the food that they want and need and participate in growing it, that people have the same amount of access and opportunity to just build a relationship with the earth. And that's a lifelong thing that I don't think can be taught. It kind of just happens when you're out there and in the dirt. So it'd be nice to find ways where our schools and our streets and our farms and our homes and institutions aren't as like right angled and concrete and boring, but a little bit more intermingled with the surroundings, and the built environment and the natural environment. So somehow, I don't know, fuzzily, that's a part of my vision for equitable food system also.
Thank you all. I think, Alex, what you touched on at the end there is that none of this exists in a vacuum. There will always be overlapping and interlying factors. So of course, perfect might be unattainable, but we will always strive for better. And unfortunately, we are at time. We have so many great questions that I wish we could get to. So what we will do is send the questions to the panelists for them to respond to on their own time. And then we will send out those answers to you all in an email, so that we're able to get as much out of these wonderful, knowledgeable experts that we can. And as we close out, I'm going to send in the chat a link to the evaluation form. So it'd be really helpful for us if you could fill that out and let us know what you thought of the webinar tonight and what you would like to see in future webinars. And then also, if any of the panelists have any pieces of advice that you would like to share with students in food justice work. Most of our students are kind of touching food justice for the first time. I would love to hear your advice for them.
So I'm sorry, my piece of advice is to study. Study. If you are new to this field, pick up a book. There are so many books out there around food sovereignty, food security, as well as agriculture as a form of resistance. Black Food Geographies, written by Dr. Ashante Reese, is a really good book that looks into food environments and discuss how that shapes food security in different people's eating habits. And then this is another great book, Freedom Farmers, written by Dr. Monica White, which talks about agriculture as a tool of resistance. If you want to learn more about food charity, this is an awesome book. Big Hunger talks about the business behind food charity. And then a book that I'm studying right now is Rebuilding Food Sheds. And this book breaks down the different components of the food system.
And the advice that I always give to students is to remember that every situation that you're in is an opportunity to learn from the people that you're interacting with. I think one of the most impactful part of the experiences of being in service to other people is that the people that you are in service to are also giving you the gift of perspective, of experience. There's always something to learn and something to teach with everyone that you come in contact with, and just to remain open and to, I always tell people as often as you can, like, have a conversation with the people that you're interacting with, because hearing about their experiences and their stories is going to teach you just as much, and it's going to give you just as much as you're giving them, and it's going to teach you just as much as you're getting in your formal education.
I guess I'll just add that we need folks who are coming at this from all perspectives. So if you're a science person, do that and bring that science background to agriculture and food justice, racial equity justice, policy, nutrition, history, African American studies, indigenous history, all of those areas, whatever your academic specialty is, bring that to this fight, because we don't need all people from one academic program, right? All of those views are really important and helpful. And so I just want you to feel empowered that if you're an accounting major, that's really important, because we have to make sure that we can figure out how to make this sustainable economically, right? So all of those skills are really important, and bring those to the fight.
Yeah, I just want to echo what what Carly just said. I think a lot of what I would say is just for everyone to do a lot of the deep introspective work of, like, thinking about who you are in relation to the communities that you're in or the issues that you're passionate about changing, and let that guide and inform what your role is. And I think that to figure that out, what your role is or isn't in any particular issue, involves like who you are and what your lived experience is and what your proximity to that issue or community is, but it also involves what you're passionate about, what skills you have, and what it is that you can bring to the table. So yeah, just meditating on all of that to figure out your role, and also know that that changes with time. It's not like you pick your role today and that's you're locked in forever. Like that's going to always change. So embrace the journey.
Awesome. So I just wanted to thank everyone so much. And again, Sydney, thank you for supporting us through our time together. Thank you to the audience. I personally look forward to staying in touch with Alex, Kabibi, Siobhan, and Carly. And I know that you all just picked up a lot more interested people as we had this, hour and a quarter together. And I just wanted to say, I chatted how inspired I am. I really am. This is a movement of so many different kinds of people who are all committed to making things better for the larger community locally and, wherever we see these borders, but we're all humans. And, just that commitment of, I see you, I care about you, that we're in this together. And being in this together does mean a deep respect and love for the earth, no matter where we're at. So, again, as we have here, please stay in touch with us as we move forward with some more conversations together, January being our next one. And we'll be sure to put forward more thoughts from everyone on the panel today. So just thank you all for your time. An unrenewable resource. You all could have been somewhere else tonight, and just being here together just really it matters. So thank you all, and we look forward to more talks really soon. Thanks again.